God, as members of the Rangi District Council, we give thanks for all the good things of our district and the advantages we enjoy. We pray that you will give us wisdom and guidance as we conduct the affairs of this meeting. We pray for all the communities in the district we represent. Help us to be fair and honest in our discussions and help us to work together in unity for the welfare of all your people. Amen. Thank you. Have any apologies? Sorry? Oh. An apology. Can we have a... Can everyone see that? You'll move.
Happy to move.
I'll second. All those in favour, please say aye. Public forum. We've got no public forum. Next item, conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared for items for discussion and decision today? There are none, thank you. Confirmation of the order of business. I see no reason to change the order of the business. Are anyone else aware of anything? Thank you. Confirmation of our minutes held long time ago.
22nd of June.
22nd of June. Can I have a mover for those, please?
Happy to move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Andy. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Our next item is 7.1, follow-up action items from our previous risk and assurance meetings. Take that as read. I've had a discussion with the Mayor and Chief Executive regarding the item on the number 11. Where am I? The business park. Lost it. There will be a report to that at the Rail Hub at the December meeting presented by the Chief Executive. Right. So I think that's an important issue, and it will be a comprehensive report identifying the issues and the issue for the coming to this committee is probably there is actually identification of risks and recommending to council if there's anything further that can be done to mitigate those risks. It's not necessarily for a formal decision by this committee in terms of any decisions, but it's about the assessment of potentially the risks going forward. Are there any other comments on any of the items that are outstanding? Mr. Tombs, you've got one or two items. Any comments you want to comment on those?
No, I think they're all completed or soon to be completed.
Thank you. So I'll move the recommendation that the report follow-up actions from the risk and assurance meetings be received. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Chair's report that was circulated. Any questions, comments on that? I think we've already got it on this report, but I think it would actually be, when we come to the risk reporting, it would be good just to consider those, and also the financial reporting. Let's talk about those two items when we come to the financial reporting. That's my only consideration. I think the issue over Three Waters is, even if we have a change in government, that the uncertainty over what is being proposed by the national government is unclear. And there are, if they, and the words I'm deliberately using are if they then repeal and replace, there will be significant risk for the council in the short to medium term, because of there's already legislation in place that the council is required to comply with, particularly around the LTP. And so if that is all repealed, then what does the LTP actually, can we actually even achieve an LTP in the required time frame? So to me, that's a future discussion we need to have. Any comments, Mr. Chief Executive?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thanks for that. It's fair to say that it is creating a hell of a lot of uncertainty, amongst a large number of councils. I don't think we're in the critical position of having to have money before that, as some councils are, but no doubt has an impact on the LTP and how that proceeds. But yeah, watch the space.
Yeah. Councillor.
Chair, if I could just make a comment, and with regards to what is a significant risk around the outcomes in a few weeks' time, do we need to have quite a strong, almost disclaimer in our LTP somehow along the line? I mean, I know we've discussed it at LTP workshops, but I just think we need to be very, very clear that what we're possibly going to be going forward with is, very subjective.
But there is guidance at the moment as to what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
The question will be as to whether there's a significant change, but that's so much up in the air. We've spent some time considering it, even if there was a suggestion that the LTP be not prepared this year and goes out a year, so it's deferred for a year. But my view, which we're talking about, is that you've done so much work on it already. It gives some sort of guidance on going forward anyway. So I don't think we can do anything more. And I think every council's in the same boat. So if there's a national declaration that it be deferred, I'm just not sure how that'll work, but I suspect some councils will run with what they've got anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's too early to call.
Yeah.
The issue that I have is that Entity A, which is the name now, I can't remember, right? The Auckland and North one is well underway in terms of making that transition. And probably by the end of the calendar year, the majority of the work would have actually been completed to actually begin that process. So trying to unpack that is going to be problematic at best. The issue is that it's going to take the government of the day, if it is repealed, some time to actually write the legislation and get it passed, because they need to come up with a new plan. They just can't just repeal it because there's so much consequence. So that's we're in a very, very, very hard space as the councils. I mean, the water will keep flowing, but what it actually means for the organisations is, and the money that has already been spent.
However, there may well be entities that don't wish to unpick what they've done and look at it as a regional model.
Yep.
It will still be subject to changes within the Act as to how they operate, but the work that they're doing may well not be discarded.
I don't disagree with that, but even if they become a CCO, there needs to be a huge amount of work to actually create the CCO.
Yeah.
Rather than to that. Yes.
Just the one further comment though is that I do think that everybody accepts that the way we're currently doing it is probably not sustainable going forward as well. So
I don't think he's
so long as you're playing in the field and trying to determine what's best for your own council, that's the key in my view.
Yeah. Okay. I'm happy that the Chair's report for September be received. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Next item, 9.1, health and safety. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to take the paper as read, noting that there are the most 3 recent health, safety and wellbeing dashboards attached along with highlights from our work program. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, observations? Sorry, Fee.
That's all right. I'm just interested with the increasing insecurity around the front desk and perhaps other areas of council. Do they have drills to practice a reaction?
In terms of the panic alarm, there's a procedure for that.
Yeah.
Which is practiced.
Yeah, so that they do, yeah. Thank you.
There's a procedure for different types of events, including the panic alarm and involving police.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Just on that, right? That is a consistent theme across all my risk and assurance committees about increased threats and poor behaviour by the members of the public, aggressive behaviour, and I don't know what we can do about it, right? Because it's actually a society problem, right? But our number one focus is actually to keep our people safe. Comments? I mean, I've
got a thought, you might have read it. No, I don't know if you can overreact to some of these things. I see the people sitting outside, winds down here, and I think, God, are they going to stop anybody causing harm to people? And yeah, just got to make sure that the procedures are in place for if there is an event that they can get help as soon as they can.
I have heard of some good positive de-escalation courses that are available.
Yeah, can I make a comment? That's my team out there, and they do regular training on that. They discuss it, they have a monthly meeting and they discuss any incidents that have come up and how they're mitigated. They have, very strong procedures out there that if anything needs to be addressed, that they come and do that with us. So I think, and Galen would say the same about the team in the wider areas too, and the other in libraries, etc., that we're constantly talking about it with them. We're doing publicity on social media about behaviour that's acceptable and not acceptable. We've got signs out there now on that exact issue, and I know there was a list who've come up this week, even between councils, that the behaviour is getting worse, and they're talking in that group about how they actually deal with that intimidating behaviour. So there's a lot of work that goes on with our staff around it.
I know within the local government sector there's been some mayors and councillors talking about their own private security at home, bearing in mind that their addresses, some of the stuff I receive in my letterbox is not flash. And I know, for instance, with the Mayor of Tara has had people come to her home, which is country, I say, some sensitivity around the easy access of personal addresses. I'd still be a strong believer in that. For instance, my address should always be known, and my contact details should always be known. Comes with the territory, but it does come with a degree of risk.
Anything else on
Yes, Chair, just direct to the report. It's a question I did have when I was looking at this last night. A number of the under the wellbeing news things there, they appear to be not mandatory, they appear to be voluntary. What is the uptake of some of these? And the reason for the question is, if there's only limited uptake, are they required to be? Do you keep supplying them? I mean, I just was wondering, do we analyse that? I'm sure you do.
Yes, we definitely do analyse it, and we review our wellbeing program regularly to ensure it's getting good uptake and adding value. And as a result of that, we do make changes periodically to it. So the initiative set out in there because they're getting good uptake. So things like, I think this month we talked about our mole maps. Does continue to have good uptake, but we do monitor it and we do monitor usage.
And the driver training, is that compulsory? Because it
Um,
sits at this 36, 37%, which is quite small.
Yeah, so we are wanting everyone who drives a work vehicle and strongly encouraging everyone else who drives. That's been a progressive thing, and it's really about the scheduling and availability of courses. Progressively, we expect that number to get closer to 100%.
I've got, I had the same concerns about the driver safety. I know in my previous lives we had actually just undertaken the council that I worked at. Anyone, I think there was about 80% take up over over a period of time, and it actually saved one of the drivers. She actually said that it actually saved her from having a serious incident because she had actually learnt to actually do some stuff that she wasn't aware of. So to me, I actually really, to me that's critical that we actually lift that number. I know there's availability, but I think it's probably we need a target and to move on. That's something we can do to help our staff.
But there certainly is a plan in place to offer courses, lift that number. It's being widely promoted. Of course, due to staff leaving, the number's never likely to be 100%.
Yep.
But yeah, we would like to see it closer to 80 or 90%, and there's a plan for that.
Yep. Thank you, Simon.
Just a query, the driver's safety course that you offer, is that different to what is offered when you go and get your licence and you can get it faster if you do the driver's safety course? Because
Yeah,
expensive driving course.
there's several different options for
Yep.
driver safety that we're offering. One of them is a defensive driving program, which is targeted at people who have been driving for several years rather than being new drivers
Yep.
doing their licence. But we do have other things that we're offering, like refreshers on the road code, simulator training, four-wheel drive training.
All right, any further discussion? Okay. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Thank you, Mayor Andy. Do I have a second? Thank you. Dave got him first. All right, all those in favour, please say aye. Our next item is our Treasury policy update. Dave.
Thank you very much.
Take your report as read. Any questions? I've got a number. Oh, Simon.
So do I.
Yep, away you go. Yeah.
I think it was page 32, there's just a couple of why change the percentages from for the net interest / annual rates from 25 to 30, and similarly page 34, why change it from 175 to 280 seems quite a drastic change.
Yeah, okay, so what the policy does, it adopts the borrowing covenants that are applicable to us as per the LGFA. And because we're a guaranteeing member as opposed to a non-guaranteeing member, the rates are different to such councils. So guaranteeing members have different borrowing covenant ratios than non-guaranteeing members.
Yeah, and to me that's, but I would actually be saying, right, the policy, yes, that's the upper limit, that's from LGFA, but I would be saying is what is actually the need over the foreseeable future, having done, having an estimate of what your borrowing needs, because to me it's almost a false limit if you're never ever going to get there, and maybe if the committee are happy with what's recommended, I would strongly recommend that as part of your financial strategy, that number actually be reviewed as part of a financial strategy. Yeah.
We're doing that.
Yeah, I know you're doing that at the moment. Any other questions, Simon?
Oh, what sort of liabilities do we have being a guarantee now, to that fund? The guarantor. That's a big question.
Practically zero. Interestingly, Standard and Poor's used to give LGFA guaranteeing councils a plus if they're a member of the LGFA. They've since stopped doing that, but it's seen as the theoretical academic risk as opposed to a practical risk. Jay, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I can add lots. We had another discussion
Yeah.
about this last week, another committee meeting. The risk for a council being a guarantor is if a council is unable to pay its debts as they fall due, that and that is after a commissioner has been appointed to collect the rate that has been set to pay that outstanding debt. So any council, whether they're a guarantee or not, is required to, when they become a member of LGFA, not a guarantor, is to have a debenture trustee appointed where there is the ability, should the council fail to pay its debts, a commissioner is appointed and that commissioner, in terms of the legislation, has the ability to set a targeted rate to repay that debt. So the guarantee would only be in place if a commissioner couldn't collect that rate that had been set. So the example that I would have is that there would be a district that had a calamity, a significant natural disaster calamity, that there were no rateable properties of any value left in the district and the people couldn't afford to pay the rates over a period of time. So there are other short-term methods that LGFA has available should a council not meet a debt repayment in terms of their liquidity risk. So the LGFA has significant facilities available that they can draw upon to meet all their obligations. So that would be the worst case scenario would be that Auckland has a volcano and there was no more rateable properties in Auckland and there was still a debt due on Auckland Council.
Just if I can make comment, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but to Councillor Loudon's comment, we as a guarantee are on a pro rata basis.
Correct, yes.
So as a smaller council, we're a pro rata basis to the total
Yeah,
debt.
and that's what I'm saying is, so the worst case would be at Auckland, because it would generally be paying the lion's share because it's got the biggest rating base across the whole country. So the proportion that is required to be paid is all guarantors a proportion based on their total rate income. And that's what I'm saying, it's the worst case. And if that was to happen, I'm sure the government would be stepping in.
So what I just took out of one of the comments you made, that the commissioner comes in and he can set a rates remission.
I set a special rate to recover that debt. Yes.
So what I've concluded out of that is the ratepayer is the last resort.
Correct,
Probably
absolutely.
the last resort, and I've been trying to make those points about debt as we go along, that the ratepayer ultimately will be the people that pay the debt back.
Yep.
Yeah, Philip.
Oh, wow.
So used to turning that way out. Cheer. Just in terms of some councils struggling to pay the debt on some of the Three Waters stuff leading in, is that going to be an issue if there's no ability for them to get extra money over the next 6 or 8 months while that pans out through this?
Not from your council perspective. It will be an issue for the individual council, but not for your particular council being a guarantor. So it won't actually trigger the guarantor. because to me, for a guarantor to, so the first issue is the council, while they don't actually have the ability to collect it, right? They could actually set a target. They could actually set a target rate and use that. Right? There's all sorts of mechanisms that are available to the individual council before it even gets even close to this. And LGFA also have, I think it's about $1 billion of liquidity.
So we'll get into that.
So it becomes if there was a council in default, it becomes a timing issue for LGFA not triggering the guarantor.
So that may happen in this period.
There may be some councils that might be in default. Yeah. I think some have been come today. Yep.
This is my bigger concern is that we've heard before that when debt falls due, we don't pay it back, we just reborrow it.
Yep.
And so that we start to increase our debt loading. And there seems to be no obligation to pay back the debt. And there's going to be a tipping point where around the country, all the councils are possibly doing the same thing. And there's going to be a point where chickens come to roost.
Yeah, can I just answer that one?
Yeah.
The issue is cumulatively, the councils, that's why we have those maximums. And this is the interesting thing with, well, at the moment, the maximum we can borrow is 280% of our total rates, and that's generally the maximum across the whole country. Interestingly, with LGFA, Auckland is the biggest borrower, but Auckland can only borrow up to 40% of its borrowings from LGFA. It has to go to the market as their own entity to borrow the rest. So that also provides some protection for the rest of New Zealand. If Auckland was to have a problem, then we're only exposed to 40% of their total debt. Also, yes, I agree that there is an accumulation, but if you look at the LTPs, there is actually a reduction in debt based on the total LTP number. I got Dave, I'm say Councillor Dave here. I'm now doing the same thing. Dave,
I'll hold my insults in this. No, I think it's been covered what you said, Chair. Thanks.
Yeah, I had quite a discussion with the Mayor of Christchurch on this matter. So there they have effectively two forms of debt. The first is the debt that is within their holding company against assets, and the second debt is the debt that the council has external to that. And that debt is played off internationally as well. Their current debt's sitting at $2 billion, and it doesn't include the holding company debt that is also significant. So, their interest bill is something like $340 a minute, and they see that as unsustainable. So there are some very big councils in this position, as well as some of the small councils, including one reasonably close to us. So, but the government, ultimately the government, it's theoretical because government will step in at some stage, especially with a small council, and put a commissioner in and restructure it in some shape or form.
And also, you've raised a really good point. People remember the debacle with Kaipra, and they had $80 million of debt, of which 50 was actually due within one repayment. Under the LGFA rules, Kaipra would not have been able to, when it was in that position, it could not have joined LGFA, because LGFA rules excluded the profile that Kaipra had in terms of its covenants. So before you become a member of LGFA, you've got to pass their threshold, right? And it is not an automatic process that you can automatically join LGFA as a council. In fact, there will be one council that will never join LGFA because they don't actually have a sufficient rating base, Chatham Islands. Okay, so, there's yes, there is a increased risk. Dave is actually right. It's a theoretical guarantee only, but worst case, it could actually happen. And as Councillor Davis said, it's actually proportionate anyway.
Just further to that, and I think, if I may, Chair, what Councillor Larden has said, and given the fact that we're sitting at a risk and assurance meeting, is a valid point. We do need to be aware of
Absolutely,
our
yeah.
debts, and that's why we have, our treasury management policies, and that's why we have these meetings, because we do need to be aware of what the accumulated impacts of these things are. So, to hear the explanations is great, but it's also good to remind ourselves of asking the question from time to time as to what is the risk and where do we lead to, and just to be mindful of it in our decision making.
And as I said, I actually had a good debate at another council last week on identical the issue. So to me, it's actually appropriate that this committee debate it, and then it gives also assurance to the community that because you're now a guarantor, that doesn't potentially significantly increase the risk to the ratepayer, because as you know, it's been said, it's the ratepayer who actually ultimately has to pay. Yep.
Thank you. And just make a comment around some of the comments that the committee members have made. There are some councils, we're all talking to each other and we're all talking about future rates increases. Some councils are setting their future rate increases in the LTP as CPI plus, say, 2% plus a certain percentage for debt repayment specifically. So that's obviously a discussion we can have if that's where councils want to go.
Yeah.
But with higher rates, we pay debt. It's all cash.
Councillor Fee?
I'm just interested from the ratepayer's perspective. They must, so if we look at a smaller council with probably a high deprivation rate, there must be nearly a limit that the ratepayers can afford.
Yes.
So really, in a nutshell, we are relying on central government to come and with a rescue package.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the issue is that the government won't guarantee a council. That's part of the assumption, right? But to date, the government has actually stepped in. Kaipara was an interesting case. So Kaipara, their debt was too high. They appointed commissioners. Commission has actually cut the cost for the council and repaid significant amount of debt. So in 2012, they had over, their debt was about $90 million. Now it's down to 44 million. Sorry? Yeah, we won't go there. Yeah, totally we won't go.
Whispered that it shouldn't have happened, but
Yeah. So again, interestingly, I agree it should never have happened. But the problem is that it did happen, and the community elected the council that made the decision.
just as I can make a comment though, is that it's the cumulative low rate increases that actually have snuck up on some people, some councils. So it unfortunately does get into the political process, as you know, and the government at some stages was putting a cap on what you could go to in terms of rating increases too. And it doesn't, you don't need to be a nuclear scientist to realise that all of our infrastructure is getting older to that time.
Yes.
And at that time, some of them were paying, kept them low so that they actually became unsustainable with that cumulative. And that is an issue for councils, you know, that you are inheriting some of that. It's not so bad, but some of the councils have suffered from that. That's reality.
Yeah.
But similarly, in my mind, yes, the asset has been sweated, but, you know, and so going forward, you know, what is the likelihood of being below 7 or 8%? So we're 7 or 8% year on year. How sustainable is that for our community?
That's the exact issue that's facing the future of local government.
Yep.
That's what they're saying, is that that is unsustainable. But there are other techniques. They could have offered 0% loans or something. You know, there are interventions that could have happened from government to the local government sector, because it is one that needs to work together.
Yeah.
I guess that's the issue, is that the future of local government is looking at that. So.
Yeah, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, Cyclone Gabrielle is the classic example at the moment of government intervention. So so there are a series of deals being done, and for instance, whereas councils like Hastings are faced with a 50% of a buyout of those affected properties that can never be reoccupied. The government has come in behind and said, we will support you by a total rebuild of a couple of your major bridges. We will just pick up that cost. And so there's all sorts of sort of almost games being played between those councils. So the government has absolutely recognises there's been an event that a council cannot handle and puts individual packages in place.
Government also say as well, and government have actually recognised that it's the water debt is unaffordable for cumulatively for local authorities. That's why it's actually done this reform, and the new water entity has a debt ratio net. I think it's 800% of its total revenue. Okay, so to me, but then someone's got to pay it, but that actually then gives the new water entity significant more ability to borrow, whether that's right or wrong, not right, but it becomes, yes, but then that debt still needs to be paid back by the consumer, including your ratepayers.
Could I just make a comment? And I think this is a really, really good debate to be had, but debt is not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
It's so you have your current debt and then you have your future debt, and that's where we go into our LTP and our long-term plan. But it's a matter of understanding is why are we taking on the debt in the first place, and what is the net outcomes of it? And part of that with the comment that yes, the end payer is going to be the ratepayer, but they're also the beneficiary immediately and in the future and long term. So there is a playoff between both. But if you suddenly stop doing what you want to do, then that's possibly puts you in a worse position. I'm just saying we should just be a little bit careful that we don't bog ourselves down on this question of debt without stopping to think, why is the debt being put in place in the first place to go forward?
Simon?
I can agree with Councillor Wilson. However,
Do we need to applaud?
Now?
and I actually agree with Mayor Andy when he talks about the sustainability of debt, which is one of my big concerns, is that you get to a point where there is a tipping point where sustainability of the debt, and with interest rates going up the way it is, we need to be very mindful of how much debt we actually take on, and make sure that we can get balance with what we are trying to achieve around the government's table. And so I have been banging on about debt, but it's more about the sustainability of where the debt is, and it'll catch up with you one day.
Oh,
Can I just comment on that? However, also the pressures on the need to increase debts are often allied to the inflationary pressure of the country. But the inflationary pressure of the country actually drops the relative value of your debt as well. So, for instance, if you take out a $10 million loan, and that is a very significant figure, and in 10 years' time, the $10 million through inflation isn't quite so relative. So there's a matching here process. That's an interesting economic analysis.
and I think we're probably going off the subject, and I think this is a really good debate that council should have when it sets its financial strategy, which I understand you're actually going through now. So I just want to we could debate this for the next hour. I don't want to do that.
I'll just, yeah, I'm not against debt for infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. The problem I'm seeing though is that we set our budget for the infrastructure, and then all of a sudden a $10 million project becomes a $20 million project, and that is unbudgeted debt that keeps accumulating. And that's my biggest concern, is the unbudgeted debt that keeps coming. Oh, geez, we're $5 million over budget, we just have to borrow it. And that, I think that's the biggest risk, is anything.
And just on that, I'm not too worried about those sort of projects, right? What I am worried about is the Hastings example, where you're actually then in a disaster and you are now required to go and to fund 50% of the buyout, as well as do all your other works. Yes, some of it has been subsidised, but to me, Hastings is at serious risk of actually breaching all its debt covenants because of the amount that it actually needs to spend. So to me is absolutely understand that, and that's why when you do your financial strategy, you need to actually have your debt. Here's your projected debt, you need a contingency figure, and then you need a buffer before you go up to what is your actual, because that buffer may or may not be called upon in the foreseeable future. And that to me is where you actually agree as a collective, and I can tell you how to do that, that limit should be your maximum that the community can afford as a debt, and that's the appropriate time to have that discussion. Any more discussion on debt? I've got one other comment. On page 35 of the agenda, under foreign exchange exposure, the current wording says it is envisaged that council will not have any foreign exchange exposure. I think that needs to be referenced to section 113 of the LGA, which prohibits borrowing from foreign currency. So I think that we just need to make sure that what we're talking about in foreign exchange exposure is not borrowing, because that is explicitly prohibited under the LGA. So foreign exchange exposure is generally when you are wanting to buy something from overseas and you want to put in some form of hedge or to protect your exposure. So I think we need to be really clear that we're not talking about borrowing. It's incidental foreign exchange exposure relating to protecting councils' certainty over the amount it needs to pay, rather than the words there, because to me, the way I read that, you could actually borrow in Australian or US dollars.
Simply put some words in.
So I think, yeah,
Not appropriate.
it is not appropriate.
It's not allowed.
It's prohibited, okay? Mayor Andy.
Thank you.
I take on board that. For the councils that include in their assets significant carbon credits, how is that reflected?
Those carbon credits are actually all referenced in New Zealand dollars.
So just because they can be internationally traded,
But it's traded at
New Zealand
New
currency.
Zealand currency, yes. And we're not allowed to speculate. That's also prohibited both in our investment and... Sorry? Yeah, there's been a number of councils that have been caught out there. Not in New Zealand.
Right,
Simon.
can I move on to something?
Yep, in the Treasury policy, absolutely.
Page 34, 3.6 credit exposure. Is, they've taken out first 7 parcels of debt, and they've taken out matures in financial years different from other parcels of debt. And then it sort of suggests that it's from 6 to 3 months. That gives me the feeling that there's a bit of a treadmill that's going a bit fast, and so that it gives license to borrow more money more regularly, more quickly. And that would just concern me.
Dave, do you want to explain the rationale for...
Yeah, okay, so when the first draft of this was put together, the capital program had some big items in the first few months, in the first couple of years. And this was the first time we were really getting into the debt program. At the time this was written, we had $3 million worth of debt, and that's all we'd had forever. So the wording we put there, we thought would be applicable going into a new phase of having increased debt. And as we've gone through it, we're realising that 6 months might be a bit optimistic when some of the big spend items we had could need us spending millions in 2 or 3 months. So the pipeline, for example, or the new building, when you get big items like that, the future spend, as we know, the timing of the patterns is uncertain, and they're bigger dollars. So instead of having a capital program of 20 million, when the capital program is 40 million, you just don't know that much certainty when you're going to get the next big invoice necessarily. So a shortened time frame enables us to be more nimble and agile.
Yeah, and I would actually would like that probably one. Thank you, Simon, for that one. I think the issue for me is this is about also making sure that all our debt doesn't fall due at once, and I think that's not in a policy. A lot of policies have to say is we will not have more than 30% of our debt maturing within the first 3 years, and then no more than 60% in the next. Right, it gives you some broad parameters because that actually then avoids the Kaipara issue, where you've got 50 million all due at once, and there will be, there have been organisations, not councils, that haven't been able to refinance that amount of debt. Right? Now we've now got LGFA, but you wouldn't want to be going to LGFA and saying we've got 20 million of debt. Can we refinance all that 20 million all in 1 year? You want to be able to spread that over a period of time, and I think that needs to be in the policy as well.
Unfortunately, I've left the old Treasury policy that I read behind, but from memory, I thought we were outside that covenant. I thought that we had borrowed money that was being repaid all within a short time frame, and we were outside the policy presently. But unfortunately, I haven't got that information with me.
I thought this was more in debt management, to be fair.
Yeah.
But there's no ability for us as staff to continue borrowing that exceeds what the council has given us approval to do. It still has to be within those targets. So whatever you put down, we can't continue to increase that without requesting some sort of approval from the council.
Correct.
My understanding was that if the long-term plan, from what Dave said I think last week, the long-term plan sets the debt limits, and Dave in his role can borrow according to that long-term plan limit. That doesn't come back through council. That was my understanding of the answer to the question I had last week.
Yeah, so basically, the long-term plan sets the debt limits for each year. If within that it's an operational issue, I go and borrow as and when. I report it to Finance Committee, I report it to Risk and Assurance Committee. At the bottom of section 3.1 of the Treasury Management Policy says if we need to borrow outside the long-term plan or annual plan, then it needs prior council approval.
The other issue is, to satisfy some of our criteria here, we need to have a decent bank balance. And if you borrow to put money into the bank to satisfy that ratio, I can't think which one it was. That also, there's been some tie-up with borrowing and that ratio starting to drop off in the charts we had in the finance meeting, last finance meeting.
My understanding is the debt is actually approved not necessarily through the long-term plan, but every time you adopt the annual plan, that actually then sets, so it's the annual plan, not the LTP.
Correct, but there's the two triggers, isn't it?
Yeah.
That one sets the overall long-term stuff, but
Yes.
the annual plan sets actually what you're going to do.
Yeah.
They are both referred to section 3.1.
Just not quite sure of what you're getting at, Councillor Loudon. Is it your concern that we are doing something that you are not aware of, or in terms of management, or?
I'm in a governance role,
Yeah.
and so it's an oversight role, and understanding where things are. I'm still trying to get my head around that. And Dave's answer to the question was that he's able to borrow according to the long-term plan structure, as to or annual plan where the debt limit's going to be. So I accept that.
Yeah.
but then in the last meeting, they provide some charts regarding borrowings, and when you time that in with bank balance and getting the interest rate, that relationship working, I don't think which one you be able to tell me.
So I just
If you keep
clarify
that,
comment.
yeah, if you keep that at a reasonably high level, and it is at a high level now, I think the last time it was $11 million. That's a high amount of money to have in the bank, but that is there to satisfy that ratio.
Can I respond to that? Yeah, the bank balance isn't then just to justify that ratio. It's there for working capital needs.
Yeah.
And interestingly, what we currently get in our current account bank balance is the same as what we pay on debt. So it is cost neutral having that money in the bank. And we are going through a large capital program. Unfortunately, we don't have one of these cash flows which each month the same amount of money comes in. Our income is quite lumpy, and our expenditure is quite lumpy. So having a bank balance of around 8 to 12 million isn't, in my opinion, my professional opinion, unreasonable or unhealthy.
So if there was a large discrepancy between interest rates and what have you, you'd be managing them more closely. That's what.
Yeah. We're actually earning money on our last debt parcel. Living in the bank. I'm not saying I'm speculating and doing that, but it's, it does mean that it's not dead money sitting in the bank.
Just Councillor Loudon's question, we did see some modelling in some LTP workshops that showed that we would, some scenarios that we were playing around with, and that was only a workshop environment that showed we would be close to or would breach some of our current policies. Now, whether or not that's what you're referring to when you made the comment that we're operating outside those boundaries now, but we did see some modelling in our discussions that would have pushed us with those graphs, yes?
No, we're not operating outside that boundary. What I meant was that there is a situation where we had borrowed money, and a lot of the borrowings that we borrowed were all falling close together, and it was outside that policy.
Well, at the moment, you don't actually have a policy like that, because this policy that you've got in front of you has got the track changes. So that includes what's your existing policy and what's now being proposed. What I have suggested is, I don't know how you do this, Mr. Chief Executive, right? Interim Chief Executive, that I think the policy needs to, exactly what Councillor Simon has talked about, we need some clear bands of how much debt is in the short-term bucket, medium-term and longer-term bucket. Because that's not there at the moment.
It is included in the Treasury report that goes to the Finance Committee.
Yeah, but in terms of the
policy.
In the policy?
Easy enough, yeah.
Yeah, I think it needs to be in the policy, and then you are reporting against policy. Now, the problem we have for other councils, if other councils have that, the other problem is because you've got this uncertainty over the Three Waters, you don't want to be holding on to debt for Three Waters that's due for repayment in 5 years' time, because if the Three Waters continue, you will actually then get paid out by the entity on transition day. So you don't want to be having, say you've got water debt of say $15 million, you get $15 million from the new entity on transition day, but then you would actually have say 10 of that $15 million due for repayment in 3 years' time. You don't want that. You want, at the moment, because of the proposal, you want all your water debt as close as possible to the transition date. So a number of councils that have got reasonable amounts of debt are actually going outside of policy to manage that transition. Now, does Dave help me here what the debt that you've currently got, how much it relates to waters?
25 mil.
25 mil. So you've got to be really careful about the length of the debt for that with LGFA, because if you've got greater than 20 million, you'll only get repaid by the entity on the date of that it's due for repayment, not in transition as well. So then it's horribly complicated at the moment.
I'm not sure what it's going to be.
Yeah, that's what totally. So we're between. As I said before in the Three Waters, this is just another example of the risks for council surrounding the Three Waters.
And Chair, also, we will be required to take on more debt to complete our projects that we're currently working on within these timeframes.
Yeah.
So that will be a growing number.
But of
Mayor
course,
Andy.
you know, it's likely to be, if there's a national government, it's likely to be a regional type model of some shape or form. So understanding the debt profile of who else is in the region is also important.
Correct.
So, you know, if we went in, for instance, with, you know, Palmerston North as the Horizons region, that's a significant amount of money that they need to put into that mix.
Yeah, and, you know, they're saying it's a regional model, but you might have options of which region you join. So that throws in some curveballs as well.
Yeah, we're well aware of that.
I'm sure you're well aware of that, yeah.
But can I just say, the only other difference to that is that it may give them access to cheaper money and a bigger platform to borrow against as well.
Yes.
So there are some advantages in a scale model, which is what the government has been directing as well. It's just you have to be careful of your partners.
Exactly, yep, yep.
So just for clarification, based on what you've just said, the 25 million that we owe around water, are we clear when that is, you know, when that is due?
Due to repayment.
Yeah, or, yeah, so do, you know, is it around that transitionary time or?
We've got 5 different parcels of debt.
Yeah.
None of them are specifically water debt or,
That's what I was
but
thinking.
if scenario plan, if we get 25 million next October,
Yeah,
and I can't use that to repay debt, that 25 million will sit in our bank, currently earning 5.5%. I'm paying about 4% on that debt. So as the debt falls due, yeah, we can repay it. And the first repayment is 4%. The first maturity date is 2027 at 4%.
thank you.
And if it sits in the bank, it means that we'll use that to service future
Yeah.
capex needs, so therefore saving debt at 5-6%.
Thank you.
I think we've probably come to the end of, because we're talking treasury policy.
I agree.
So I think we've come to the end of the discussion. My recommendation is that we approve the recommendations to the treasury policy, including any minor amendments, which includes that provision for the overseas borrowing. And that council then further reviews it post the, so I want to put a sort of a no later than 30th of June 2024, because at that stage you'll have a much better idea of where your future debt is likely to be, because you'll have hopefully have a draft LTP. You may only have an interim, but also you will have some certainty over the three waters as well.
Can you go back over your wording again?
Sure.
Because I saw a problem with it.
Yep. Then that's yep. Now, you do not have to consult on your treasury policy. It can be amended at any time by council.
No, I'm happy now.
You happy now?
I'm happy to move.
You're happy to move? No, question is that this is actually a recommendation to council. It's not actually so this should be a recommendation to council, because we can't actually adopt policy.
Let's go to council next week.
Yep.
That being stick in the mud.
Yes.
Do you think that June would have resolved those issues?
You'll have a much better idea than we have today. I don't think they might be all resolved, but it's like,
So I guess if it's not, then the review might leave it as it is. Anyway.
yes, yep.
The thing is that the date ties it in neatly in terms of the annual plan.
So
process.
if you don't actually
Makes
have an
sense.
LTP, you have an annual plan. That's why I selected that date. I mean, you just might,
There's no changes in it.
if you do the review and there's no changes required, but what I'm signalling is post, we need to look at it again as well, that's my recommendation. I think we've got to move it from, yes, happy to second that fee, all right? Any further discussion? You comfortable once the interim chief executive?
Very comfortable.
Oh, very comfortable, I like that. Right, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried.
Can I just make the point?
Yep.
In terms of money sitting in the account, if you were paid out and a regional model of any shape or form was set up, you'd probably be transferring that to the regional entity as a credit against that in some shape or form, because the regional entity would need a cash flow position in itself. It's an interesting mix, isn't it?
I mean, at the moment, the idea is that the current proposal is the new entity will have sufficient cash, and I don't think that's actually been worked out yet, even for entity A, how the cash flow will actually work, because to me there's further work required, but there will need to be some investment from somewhere into any entity.
I've got some more on that, but I might take it offline. if you like.
Yeah, look, and I think that discussion, if we just take it right. So the next item is 10.1, which actually feeds very nicely our Treasury reporting against, now this is against the current council policy, not the one that we're recommending to council.
Yes.
Thank you.
The borrowing covenants before they were amended, or they might be amended next Thursday by council.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion? I think, Councillor Simon, this is where you had the question about the bank deposits and external debt. On 3.5 on page 40.
No.
Oh.
I do have a question on that.
Yep.
Just 3.2, just interest expense is 813K. My calculations of the debt that we have interest paid on is actually something like 1.36.
Thank you. Do you want to share your figures with Dave, how you arrived at that figure?
I just looked at all the parcels of debt and calculated the interest on each parcel and it came up to
Just round. If I can, then two of them parcels were taken out during the financial year. So the full year equivalent of our current debt may well be the 1.36.
Right.
But last financial year, roughly a third of the debt was taken up interim.
So it's
just
taken
the
out
current
during,
position.
Yeah.
clarification, Dave, so the debt was taken out during this financial year?
No, so 5 mil of the debt was taken out in April
Of this year?
2023,
Okay.
and
Thank you.
7 mil was taken out 12th of June. So that would have a zero impact really on interest
Yeah.
for the year.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, no further comments. I'm happy to move the Treasury report. Do I have a second? I think you've, no further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Next item is 10.2, our work programme. Take it as read.
No, I would just like to comment actually on page 43, section 2.4, the current areas of concern. This kind of overlaps somewhat with your comments earlier, Chair, that we do discuss current areas of concern, and in between putting the agenda papers together and today's meeting, we identified that Three Waters is an ongoing area of maybe concern or uncertainty. There's also a couple of other areas regarding the rail hub and iwi relationships that have surfaced. Too late for us to put detailed papers together for this committee, but I just wondered whether committee members wanted to discuss any of that or seek from officers further work on that regard, noting that we've already spoken about the Rail Hub paper.
Mayor Andy?
Just the rail hub paper would need to be added to this for it to come back to this.
Well, no, the chief executive can actually just put it as of right on the next agenda. And so it's already in the action sheet anyway, so it doesn't actually require any.
Yep, I accept
So
that.
the rail hub is already covered.
I can only just say about the iwi one, it might, there might be some happenings between now and then, the next reporting. So it would be an opportune time for
Yep,
that.
thank you. Any questions? I've got a couple. On page 41, annual report, we're supposed to have a summary update in September. We are in the September meeting. Can you just give us an update to verbally where we are in terms of our annual report?
Yeah, two things on that. There is, we're fine. The auditors started this week. I've completed a paper to go to next week's finance committee that summarises that the annual report's been drafted, it's being audited. We're on track with all required timeframes. There's no gaps in the annual report that are causing us any areas of concern. I just thought, didn't we say at the last meeting that was to be reported to finance committee, not to this committee?
Well, it's in your work
Yeah, it
programme
is
on
there.
page 41, right?
Can I ask you, as chair, would you like that to stay in there, or do you
Well,
happy
I
that
mean,
it's
to me-
finance reported?
I mean, the annual report isn't normally, it's a financial report. So the question I have is, what's the role of this committee in terms of the annual report? Normally, what happens is there's some discussion with the auditor as part of the development of the annual engagement, because it relates to audit, and obviously then receiving some management feedback, which we've actually got later in the agenda. So a number of my councils that actually don't have a finance committee, a draft of the annual report comes to their committee because it's of a technical nature, and there's one or two technical people sitting around the committee that actually look at that. But that's a specific issue. Mr. Chief Executive?
I think it's legitimate that it comes here in terms of a risk. If there were issues that were coming up, then that would be legitimately in front of this committee.
Yep.
So Dave says everything's on track and on all the timeframes and there's no gaps. I mean, that gives you some insurance here. If there were some issues, then reporting them here would give you the opportunity to have them debated.
Yep.
So I'm not adverse to it being in here in that sort of report as opposed to the technical report.
Yeah.
So for clarification, does the committee want me to provide written updates in September and December? I think that might be a hangover for when we were the audit and risk committee, because the words audit there was here. Did you want to see the annual report in December?
That's at the discretion of the committee. Right? I've expressed my view, right?
You'll be going to finance committee.
I'm not sure it's the actual report. I think that technically should go, but if there was issues raised, then you'd raise it within this agenda at that time.
Okay.
Just because it was coming up anyway. It's just it's like a footnote that this is the time that's coming through.
Yeah.
But the actual technical reports would go elsewhere.
Yeah. The other issue is just on page 42, we've got the RNS policy is March each year. I just wonder the relevance of that coming to this committee.
So
We can-
I missed that one, mate.
Bottom of page 42.
Revenue and finance and
As it's part of the annual plan would come to this committee, would it? No. Happy to take it out, yeah.
I mean, I think there is actually, having taken it out, one of my concerns, having doing one or two of these, there are risks associated not getting your revenue and financing policy right, and there has been change to legislation that will affect the current revenue and financing policy that needs to be brought before the committee.
It is in there twice, so I wonder whether that
Oh,
the review, that what you're talking about maybe is up here year, and that was the annual plan,
Ah,
I'm guessing.
yeah.
So that one's legit, maybe still legitimate.
Well, to me, the issue is it's actually what's our revenue and financing policy saying, and are there any risks with the proposed rates? Because I am aware of, and I was talking to the chief executive, I am aware of some councils introducing new rates as part of the annual plan. While there's been consultation, they're actually inconsistent with the revenue and financing policy. So that does cause a risk. So to me, maybe that's something you want to put on next March's plan, because you would actually be doing it as part of the LTP. And to me, in my in another life, I do review some rates, and I have found in other councils some significant risk of inconsistency. Just highlighting that for future work. Anything else?
We should perhaps tidy that one by taking that one off.
Absolutely.
That
Yep.
one off.
Yep.
So it's in there twice, it's once at the bottom as well.
Yeah.
So just take the
Yeah,
bottom,
yes.
take the bottom one off,
Yeah.
which again, and just leave the top one on, so that if there's anything consistent with that.
Yeah, and also just got a couple of policies that review September 23, which is this meeting, staff code of conduct and health and safety and wellbeing. Yep.
If I may, I can comment on them. Those two policies were both reviewed early and were presented to the June committee meeting
Yeah.
and endorsed.
I'm just saying. So the date. So the question then is that date needs to be updated for when you're going to do it next time. Just proving I've read the agenda. That's all, Sharon. Okay. So we're going to. I'm happy that we move the work program and just as amended for those changes. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Dave. Councillor Dave, that is. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Next item is 10.3, Protected Disclosures Update, page 44, very brief report. Take it as read.
Happy to take as read, noting that there's no disclosures to report, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Move receipt of.
Thank you. I'll second. All those in favour, please say aye. 10.4, Privacy Update, next page, 45.
Again, I'm happy to take it as read, noting that we have had two minor privacy breaches to report. The first of those was updated verbally to the committee at the last meeting. This is simply reporting that update. And then we had another privacy breach during the reporting period. Both were considered that there was no serious harm involved or likely to be involved, and are very comfortable that both issues were dealt with using our internal processes and that they're being resolved in full. Also noting that we did provide Privacy Act and privacy policy training to elected members and staff, and we had really good uptake of that as well as good feedback.
Thank you.
Question for me on that one. Noting that they were minor, but there are degrees of minor. Were all affected parties by it consulted that they were all happy with the outcome, and that it was not just necessarily our internal, it's been broad with everybody? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
so the parties who we knew their privacy had been breached were informed.
Excellent, thank you. That's all I needed clarity on. Thank
Are
you.
you happy to move?
Happy to move.
Right. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Simon. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. 10.6, Internal Audit Work Programme, page 48. What am I doing? 10.5. How did I miss that one? Oh. Yeah, I called. Yeah, I did. Yeah, okay. Oops. Yeah, fraud. Sorry. Thank you.
Keep the fraud quiet, shall we?
Sorry.
Keep the fraud quiet.
Yeah, absolutely important one. My apologies. Right.
So there is an update to this report compared to previous months where we have become aware of an issue that staff and officers are currently reviewing and investigating I'm not directly involved in this, but as yet, I think the investigation's ongoing.
It'll be brought to the next meeting.
Brought to the next meeting?
It's been raised with
Yeah,
you.
yes, it has been raised with me.
So just wondering about that and thank you for saying that it'll be brought to the next meeting. I'm just wondering if it's worthwhile. And I appreciate it's under investigation, that gets noted in our actions register for follow-up, because I'd hate to see this get lost or missed somewhere. Or are you happy that that is an action?
I'm
that
happy,
you'll
but
take?
I'm happy that it's an action anyway, so that it's brought up, but, we're just following the procedure that the chairman's advised and then other reports.
Thank you, happy with that.
I will make sure it's on the agenda.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, in terms of our policy, there's a requirement process that we have to be notified within a reasonable space of time when it arises, isn't there?
Yes, it's all in part of the policy and
Yeah, I'm aware of those issues, thank you. And that will be part of the report, and I would imagine that report will be actually in public excluded to begin with because of
Thank you.
the confidential nature of it. Yeah.
So, just item 3.1 there, with the communication with staff. I just see that last year, the communication went out in February, June, October. And then again in February this year. So does that mean it didn't go out in, June, earlier this year, just?
Yes,
because
so
it was
so
an oversight
it's just
or
getting the balance between regular communication and over communication.
what? Yes,
So when this is kind of this initiative or this, we're launching the awareness, it's generally speaking, you get a higher volume
okay,
and higher frequency of training.
yeah,
And then once people are aware of it, it's kind of more in maintenance mode as opposed to it being in launch mode. So the updates can be less frequent.
so how do you test that understanding is there?
to be fair, there's, through you, Mr. Chairman, there has been recent, notice of that too, which was brought to ELT, that they take it back to the staff as well. So I know that's ongoing from having been in here and seeing the correspondence going. So I think Dave raised it the other day, that just to make sure everybody was aware of it and bring it to their notice again.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to move.
Happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Andy, all those in favour, please say aye. 10.6. Now I get it right. I know what happened. I pressed the wrong button, right, on my computer. Right. Internal audit work program. Take your report as read. Are there any significant changes or information you want to bring to the committee?
No is the short answer. The last there's not been a lot of movement on this the last 2 or 3 months because long-term plan, financial year end. But I think it's next week. I've got a schedule with ELT to go through the BCP scheduled for this year, and there was another one.
Can I just say, Mr. Chairman, I think this one's an important one for me, and Dave and I have talked about it. So unfortunately, when staff are under pressure, this is one that's easily slipped, but in actual fact, it's still critical for that process to continue. So it's here in front of you, and that's something that will be useful to be reviewed at some time too, as to whether there's other things that people have on mind that they want to have a look at, or comes up internally amongst the staff. But it is, I think this is an important thing that's easily put down when things are busy.
Yes.
And pressure's on.
Yeah. And I leave that to you to manage, but I think it's important that we somehow don't lose sight of it. I don't know how you do that.
There was an employee that was part of LAS as part of this process, wasn't there?
Quite some
That was a long time ago.
long time ago.
Yeah.
That was the original setup. But part of the argument for that was an independency.
Yep.
Will that independency still be satisfied? Or is it needed?
Yeah. Okay. So if you look at each of the areas has got an A, B, or C next to it, and on page 50.
Yep.
We say there are formal external reviews, but some of them will be internal reviews and some will be overviews as opposed to being
And I
independent.
think from my point of view, that's exactly the right way to do it too, is, and sometimes an internal review can actually be more revealing than an external review as well, because everybody knows what's going on. So a mixture of those is the right thing.
Yeah. But the issue is, I agree that we need some assurance that we've got that, the right balance.
Yeah, when they,
Yeah, I know, that's in there, I know, yeah, I understood, yeah.
It's just saying if there was the capacity for the external review.
I'm not up to date with the less, but my understanding it was more in my time that was introduced, and I think it's dissolved some years ago now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my understanding that there is, I don't remember we got to, because I remember when it was at Horowhenua.
There was a difference of opinion as to whether it was taken up by everybody.
Yeah, and there was, so the LAS, there is an independent organisation that offers services to the LAS councils. I'm not sure of the actual contractual arrangements with that, whether it's through the LAS or directly with the,
So Arno sat on that less with Peter over the last couple of years.
yeah.
But I don't think it's probably been before you.
Yes, I'm not aware of it now.
When the last person resigned from that role, they just didn't fill it.
No.
Yeah.
Well, there was an arrangement with an external accountancy firm, but they're short-staffed as well. Their main auditors just left to join someone else. But there are firms that can do the external review.
If the chief executive wants a name, I have a contact that I'm aware of that has done, and they are an internal audit specialist.
I'll take it.
Okay. They also sit as as a chair, but no, as a member on another committee as well. But it's not one of their internal audit clients. Right. So happy to move.
Yeah.
Do I have a seconder? I'll second. All those in favour, please say aye. Next item, 10.7. We've got draft financial summary. I think the issue from me on this one is alluded to. I think there probably needs to be more information coming to council, and Dave has already forwarded me the issue. I wonder whether we actually need to say is what's the purpose of this report coming to this committee, bearing in mind it's risk and assurance.
It's referred to section 2.2. It was the previous committee asked for it, so
The previous committee or the previous meeting?
the previous committee. So previously the committee has asked. Yeah.
Members of the committee's view?
Well, I take your point, because this is actually a statement of fact in time that's already done, whereas we're looking at a risk and assurance perhaps for some forward actions. This is actually a past action to a certain extent, which we've already seen through council and finance, so.
Is it of any value to you is probably the question.
Well, the question, well, I can, if I need the information from other ways, there's other ways that I can actually extract that information, right? It's publicly available. The question for the committee is this is my personal view, it's also considered good practice, that the committee, as part of its insurance role, ensures that the council is getting good, robust financial information. So that's the overarching principle. So some committees receive this on an annual basis as a sample of what is going to be proposed to go to the council in its wider form on terms of ongoing reporting, so they can actually say, yes, the council is getting the right high level information. And I don't want to be creating any aspersions. One of the things too is and I don't know how you do this, one of the things of the role of the committee is to gain assurance, so that, what are the quality assurance processes to ensure that the reports are actually robust. And maybe that's probably something for debate, not necessarily for now. Maybe, Mr. Chief Executive, do we want to put that as an item on next committee meeting in terms of the work program? What is the role of this committee in terms of the financial reporting? and have a sort of a bit of a discussion, rather, and everyone's given it some thought, and talk about some of those
I
principles.
think you and I probably have a similar view. It's not a finance committee,
Correct.
but what you're saying is how do you assure that the information going to the finance committee is correct?
Or, yes. Happy you give that some.
Yep, absolutely.
If the committee members are happy with that, I don't want to duplicate work that's going elsewhere, and I don't want to overload staff, but we've got an obligation as this committee.
Maybe I can talk to Councillor Fee as to
Yep.
how we handle that.
Any comments? So I'm happy that the summary management reports will be received. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Dave. Do I have a seconder? Oh, thank you, Fee. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
10.8, Board of
Sorry,
Management.
Chair, can I clarify, so did the committee want this report next committee?
No.
meeting? No.
No, so as part of that, the chief executive has taken those points on board. I'm sure we'll have a discussion about, so there will be as a paper brought back as about how we actually get assurance over the financial reporting going to council is robust and adequate. And the chief executive will talk to Councillor Fee, who I understand is the chair of the finance committee. So we leave that in your capable hands, councillor.
Indeed.
All right, management letter points. Take your report as read. Are there any highlights?
Well, the whole paper's a highlight.
The whole paper? What, the fact that there's so many closed items?
Yes, indeed. Now take it as read.
Bright colours.
Sorry? The colours are actually Audit New Zealand colours.
So on that, sorry, I wasn't sure why some were coloured and some weren't.
Third column in, there's necessary or beneficial.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but then there's others that
Uncoloured.
Yeah,
the colours, the
unnecessary.
colour, the
Oh, the
colour,
grey, oh, okay. The
Yeah.
ones that are greyed out, because the right-hand column says ready to close.
yeah.
I see.
So the whole thing has been greyed out.
Okay, thank you,
So
understand.
the grey has overridden the original colours. Councillor?
Just a general question. Is it a risk that Audit New Zealand is the only auditor that we can use?
No, they're not.
Oh, I thought in conversation that they always put their fees up, which is a cost to council, but it's pretty much the only one we can use.
No.
Oh, okay. So,
They're all putting their fees up.
I
Have you been
No, just-
part of the OAG discussions? There was one. Do you want to comment on the
No, I
fee?
don't, I haven't. I have been party to some of the discussions, but I don't think I've heard that one directly. But I do know that it can go elsewhere.
The process is, it's the Auditor General appoints the auditor. Right? Not the council. So if you are unhappy with your auditor, then you are entitled as a council to have a discussion with the Auditor General.
but it is appointed by the Auditor General.
Yes.
And then the council has to,
Correct.
if they want somebody else, they have to.
They have to
Put
go
their
through.
case.
Now, if you go back in history, once upon a time there was a ability for council to tender its audit provider. That didn't give any assurance because the tender process, because the Auditor General is technically the auditor, there was a representative from the Office of the Auditor General, there was an independent person appointed by the Auditor General, and there was a representative from council. The three of those individuals evaluated the tender process, and they then recommended to the Auditor General who was appointed. That was the old process before Kevin Brady became Auditor General. And then Kevin Brady, when he became Auditor General, said, well, this isn't really working because Audit New Zealand are still picking up 80 or 90% of the work, so I will just appoint. So that goes back 16, 17 years, 18 years ago when Kevin was appointed, Kevin Brady.
At the same time, I was appointed.
Yeah,
Just to add to the councillor's Councillor Moore's question there, we did quite a deep dive into the cost of audit and the cost of fees, possibly a couple of years ago, when it came up, and as to part of our cost savings when we were looking at an annual plan process, I believe. 6 or 1.5 dozen, it does come down to how well we are prepped at the internal level before the auditors come in. So yeah, wasn't any great benefit that we could see for necessarily jumping out of one camp into another as a cost saving.
Well, a process to get the auditor general to change as a process.
We did do quite a bit of work looking into it.
I'll just say something here, but, so the audit providers are currently Audit New Zealand, Deloitte's and EY. Last year, Audit New Zealand did not have capacity to do all the audits that they were originally allocated, and a number of the Audit New Zealand councils were then allocated to other providers. I know of one organisation that had its audit provider move from Audit New Zealand to one of the big four. Their fees, their time they spent on that, and compared with previous years, was double. And so therefore they are, and they're saying is we think Audit New Zealand underquoted previously, therefore we are actually looking to increase our fees accordingly. Right? So
That's my understanding.
right?
They had to stick with the offer of engagement that came out of audit.
Yeah, correct, for last year, not for this year, okay? And that's where the argy-bargy is still occurring, I can assure you of that.
So I think there's two levels here. Is one is if a council's underperforming and providing that detail.
Yep.
Then now they're getting, which didn't used to happen either. And on top of that is a benchmark as to what others are charging. And so therefore you've got a double whammy for those that have underperformed.
So do we get a price reduction if we're well prepared like we are?
They still do a quote on the actual hours that are being spent on it, so they do that. But again, they would probably argue that generally the quote is for a performing council, and the penalty then comes
After the event.
after the event.
That's a letter of engagement that comes to me.
Yeah, and the problem we have across the sector is originally the standard for accounts was here, and therefore the auditing standard was here, now the accounts are here, right? So therefore the auditors have actually lifted again, but also compounded by that, the auditing standard is actually lifted, so the audit fee has also gone up as well as the amount, because believe it or not, there's a shortage of auditors, the price, and it's based on supply and demand, and the amount they're having to pay the auditors has actually gone up, and therefore your fee has gone up. So it's actually a triple whammy.
And that was exacerbated during COVID too, where they couldn't get anybody in.
Yep.
And so there's been a backlog of that too. I still think that the audit does do a function that is worthwhile to both the council and to us as chief executive. So I think there is a value in it, and it has been hard in the past to compare as to whether that you're getting value for money. But I do think that going out and testing the market because of the issues has brought that into perspective. Unfortunate. But I personally do welcome the auditors into the organisation, because I do think it is an exercise that is worthy to go through for your protection and mine.
Oh, no, I'm not disputing that. I'm
I wanted to
disputing that,
do the cost.
we only have one choice, but we obviously haven't.
Been moved to,
You actually technically don't have a choice, but you've got the ability to influence.
Happy to move 10.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Simon. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Next item, 11.1, insurance update.
Again, just have to take it,
Take it as read. Any questions, comments?
Just to comment, if I may, Chair, that
absolutely.
Mr. Toombs and a couple of other members of council did spend quite a bit of time looking into the question of our insurance, and so I'm just confirming that the workshops have been held. I'm comfortable with where the report reads.
So when you get round to moving it, I'll second it.
Sorry?
So on that basis, I'll be happy to move.
You happy to move?
And I'm happy to second on that basis.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Can I have a mover that we move into public excluded?
Move.
Sorry, moved.
Grab someone.
Okay,
Right, oh, sorry, I
okay.
missed something if you
you
don't
missed
mind.
something
Yeah,
and you're asking the chair's permission to go back?
yes, sorry. It
You
was
think-
actually, councillor Wilson that rushed in and wanted to accept the report for
Oh,
question.
okay, yeah, okay.
Not like me.
Just, to prove that I did read the,
Yep.
as well.
Yeah.
Item, in that, chart on page 56, as per my previous comment, I just want, it's
Oh.
written there that, the fraud policy was planned for June 2023, and so that, well, I don't think that should be in there since it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then if we go to the next page on item 2223, which is the dry weather sewage overflows, it's actually been cut off. That doesn't say, it says this is a time, and I don't know what that means.
Do you want to quickly comment
I'm
on
just
that?
trying to find the first one. So the first one was talking about the fraud communication going out and
Yeah,
going for
Fraud-
October.
No,
fraud risk assessment,
Yeah, so the June update was fraud awareness comms planned for June and October. Yeah, I think the chief mentioned that I did do a comms in October to ELT, but I didn't update the paper as above to reflect that. What's the second one?
but I thought it didn't happen in June.
I couldn't remember, but the
Right.
chief reminded me that I did do a presentation on an initiative with ELT.
Oh, okay, rightio then. And then, sorry, the second item on the next page, which is dry weather surge overflows. The update has been shortened, and I'm not sure what was cut off there.
Okay, to the chair's blessing, I'll email members
Thank you.
with the full wording of that.
Yeah.
I can give you a quick summary of that.
What would you prefer, councillor? Me to update or Arno's spiel?
I know.
Oh, yeah.
See what Arno has to say,
Thank you.
see any further information.
It's time consuming and we do not have the resource to be able to do that at the moment. That's what the rest of that sentence says.
So you would have to manually check.
Every rain event with every overflow to find.
So it was a beneficial recommendation, was it, not a necessary one, in terms of what audit was saying?
The auditors are saying it's necessary, so what the auditors did at the last audit, they actually sat down and checked rain gauges that they could find in the areas of the overflows to tell us that 2 of the overflows were actually during wet weather.
And that's what we should do. So we agreed that ideally that is what we should do.
But I did mention that it is very labour intensive and we do not have the resources available to be able to do that every year. So what we would have to find is an alternative automated solution that they would agree with.
If I may,
So so can we just go what page you were on, so we're all talking from the same page?
Page 57, the third item down. Meaning the second item down, dry weather sewage
Yeah.
overflows.
Oh, okay. I read it and I thought, okay, well, looks like we're going to get a response in January 2024.
Yeah.
Maybe in terms of that, I'm actually comfortable that you bring a summary, I don't want a 55-page report, right, about the issues you've just talked about, and what are high-level options and what they actually cost, because one of the issues that I perceive is that unless we address it, audit will be actually coming back and saying we haven't done anything about this, which is probably going to be too late for this year. But what I am suggesting is we actually make a decision as the audit, so Risk and Assurance Committee, that we say, we concur with management, it's unaffordable, we don't have the resources, and therefore we will just continue with status quo, or we will make some modifications, Mr. Chief Executive.
Presumably, did you say they're only recorded in the wet weather flows?
Yeah, so the idea is, the difference between the two would be if it's a dry weather overflow, it means there's a problem with the network.
Yeah.
If it's a wet weather overflow, it could be because of I9. So you need to distinguish between the two. The one that they're after is overflow during dry weather. So you have to prove to
And you
them.
didn't find any?
Well, we can't check them in that to that kind of detail. Obviously, auditors can, but we can't. So what we do is we record all the overflows on the system.
I just think that it may be worthwhile having a discussion with auditors as to what it actually means.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, so we can bring that one back, right?
Yeah.
As part of, because I imagine November meeting, we will be receiving a further update from our good friends, the auditors. And you can actually have that clarified as part of the, yeah, I'm just conscious of time, yeah.
I'm just wondering whether there's some parts of the network that could be regarded as critical in terms of criticality, if that's the correct word.
I've never seen it down to this detail.
I mean, I think, you know, Councillor Fees raised a really good point.
Yeah.
I think, and Arno's highlighted the issue, I think we just need to get some further information and bring it part back of the audit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wonder, in terms of recording rainfall events with some degree of local, and there's some people out there that have amazing records in private. We have one councillor who happens to live next door to you. I think that his rainfall records are just amazing. But trying to find those people, maybe it's an ad in the paper.
Well, a question that I have, right, is even more, right? Would Audit New Zealand accept that information from a private person? Highly unlikely, because they would actually want that to be person independent. So this is where the whole, you know,
I just want the discussion to be, because I do think some of that climate change, it may be worthwhile an investment in some of those at locations that you could use it for Doubleton.
Yeah.
But why would?
Yeah, let's not go there. Let's defer it, right? Otherwise, we'll debate this from a position of not having all the information.
I never picked that one up, so.
No, yeah. Virtual chocolate fish to
Yeah.
Councillor Fee. Right? Now, we don't need a resolution on that one. Have we moved? As a mover?
I would put a mover, but not a second.
I'll see that we move into public excluded. All right, all those in favour, please say aye.
And just on the last paper, this